Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Thoughtful Thursday show. I'm one of your hosts, Barbara Ellison, and I'm on a mission to make happiness the norm rather than the exception, because I believe that each and every one of us deserves to lead a happy, healthy, financially free, and abundant life. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, how to do that with our guest. We're so excited. And Carol, I am going to let you, we're going to, number one, introduce you, and you are going to introduce our guest.
Well, I'm Carol Henderson, and I have Life by Design. I believe that you should design your life to look better, live better, and feel better. And so all those areas of your life are very important. And I work to help people achieve that goal. And I've got my good friend, Kelly English. We've known each other for a day or two here. And walked some really fun paths together, and she has led such an amazing life, both all over the world, actually, I guess I could say. But I'm going to let her have the floor here to tell a little bit about herself, and then we'll ask her some questions. Kelly.
Well, thank you, ladies. It's good to be with you. And goodness, yeah, I wouldn't say all over the world, but I've traveled a little bit. I did some time serving in ministry over in Scotland. I joke about it because I went over at the age of 19 thinking I was going to be there for 18 months. And I ended up being there 14 years and married and had 5 children over there. And I say, God tells you enough to get you taking the next step, and some things he keeps from us. Because I think if I'd have known I was going to be there 14 years, I probably would never have taken that first step thinking it was going to be 18 months because I was a homebody. But, you know, God is faithful, and have some wonderful stories of that time over there. And we moved back to the States in 94. And my husband was a minister for a church, and we went to Florida for 6.5 years. And then in 2000, we came to Canadian, Texas, which is a tiny town up in the Panhandle. And I've now been here 22 years. So that's my little loop-de-loop. Back started off in a small town in Kansas, and now I'm back in a small town in Texas. So that's a little bit of my travel history. And in that time frame, I guess I went from single, working in church ministry, married, and took my motherhood journey very seriously. I had 5 children in 6.5 years. And so my hands were very full. I have a girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. And they are very close in age. When my youngest was born, my daughter was 6.5, fixing to turn 7. So that gives you an idea just how close they were. Goodness, my daughters asked me how I did it over in a foreign field. And I said, well, I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have the internet, and I didn't have TV. So my children were my focus, and my home was my focus. And I stayed pretty attentive to that arena. So let's see, we moved to the States in 94. And when it came, our oldest was going to go to college, and it became very evident that we were going to need 2 salaries. And so I went to school in Florida for massage therapy, because I always had a thing with energy in my hands and working on people. And I love that. So I became official, got my license. And so I've had a small practice since 2000. And then did that part-time while we still had children at home. And then once my youngest one was out, I started that full-time, and realized that that was great, but there are other things out there that may be a little bit more effective. And so I got into a network marketing company in 2012. It's the first time I'd ever done anything like that. And it was a wellness product, and we had some amazing health stories and testimonies. And I just got to see a lot of newness in life come about for people.
Mhm.
And not only was I seeing health benefits change people's lives, but financially, it was a huge blessing to my family. And we had some great success that came through team effort. And I just felt a huge blessing to be part of that. And the goal was to be able to replace my husband's income so we could step out of full-time ministry and change it up a bit, travel a little bit more, and just have a different spin on ministry. And God had a different plan. And he was diagnosed in 2014 with pancreatic cancer, and he passed away 5 months later. And my world flipped again on a different, there's no words really to explain that. And those of you who have lost a spouse,
Yep.
you can relate. But in doing that journey and feeling ill-equipped, even though I had a deep faith and I trusted God, and I've been through quite a few journeys with him, this wasn't a matter of a lack of faith or trust. It was a lack of skill in being able to process the emotions that come with such a change. And so I went to a grief recovery weekend called Spark of Life. And it was a breath of fresh air in the midst of my grief. And I was so blessed by that event that it motivated me to, a year later, to go and get certified as a grief recovery specialist, so that I can now pay forward some of the tools and the learning that I learned, that I was blessed with, that kind of helped me stay afloat and our family stay intact during a life-changing event. And so since 2015, I've added grief recovery workshops and one-on-one training for people who are grieving through the loss of death, divorce, or significant change that's left them feeling like they wished life was different or better, or more of what was working for them that is no longer working. So that's kind of what I do now, and have a full life.
I want to kind of settle in on one of the things you said, Kelly, that so many people think grieving is only a death, but
Right.
there's so many kinds of grieving. Just like, you know, your daughter saw Keith at his worst, and that was a 25-year severe illness that I've talked about before on here. But you know, there's a grieving for a loss of a husband and a provider, even in that. And people need to realize and reach out to people like you. You know, I'm going to say to reach out to you because I know your background. I know your faith. I know, you know, I've watched you walk this. But, you know, so many, and then now people are starting to grieve their pets. Like back when I was a kid, people grieved their family, their two-legged family. And, you know, it doesn't matter what the loss is there, and the grief is there. And I think people who don't go and get help, whether they can do it on their own, just in their quiet time, or if they have to reach out to somebody to help. But if they don't get that help, they get caught in that circle of grief, and it just becomes a downward spiral, that death that surrounds them all over. And, you know, you and Barbara can speak much more to that than I can, but I don't want people to miss the fact that there are other kinds of grief. You know, I want them to know they need to reach out and just say they can put chats in here. They can ask questions, and we will make sure they get answered in this format.
Grief in its simple definition is the conflicting emotions that surface when there has been a change in a normal pattern of behavior. And so loss, there's, oh man, I forget how many, but there's so many losses that can come into your life that leave you conflicted with different feelings. So you can have a healthy husband who goes through a physical illness, and you have several losses there. You have the loss of his health, the loss of the income, and the loss of your relationship that once was. And so anytime I say the key phrase is whenever you find yourself in the midst of a lot of conflicting emotions and you're sitting there wishing life was different, life was better, or more, or shoulda, coulda, woulda, that's your clue that you're grieving something.
Right.
And a lot of us, can look back to a childhood that was less than, or maybe we didn't really have much of a childhood. So there's a grief there, a loss of a childhood that you wished had been different or wished had been better. When we have the empty nest cycle, you have your children, and a lot of times women we're focused on raising our kids, and then our kids are gone and there's another change. So grief can surface then. If conflicting emotions, am I still valuable? So grief is really just the word that describes a bunch of conflicting feelings, a loss of direction or whatever. Retirement is a change.
Yes.
So
Huge.
getting married is a change, and there's a loss involved. You go from independence to interdependence, and sometimes that works smoothly and sometimes it doesn't. So it's all over us, and especially now it's more visible because people are getting more emotionally attached to their pets than their people, and their pets are dying. And there's actually a book on grief recovery for your pets, with your pets. And death and a divorce is another loss that puts you into a grief cycle. So
Well,
anytime
and there's the whole COVID thing. How many people have totally changed, the loss of their job, the loss of the socialization, and people that don't know how to do Zoom. Not that it takes the place of a hug, but it's, it helps a little bit to see faces that you're talking to. But think the whole world is in a sort of a grief process, or like Barbara calls it, the fog, the widow's fog.
So I had a widow's fog, and people that have never felt it have no clue. And the thing is that one of the things that I realized for me, I never knew I was in the widow's fog until the day I woke up. And I went, it was a tangible feeling of waking up. And in that moment, I realized that for the last year and a half after David passed away, I was like going through the motions, but I wasn't really living.
Right. Yeah.
I was going through the motions. I was working, I was eating, I was sleeping, I was visiting people, but I wasn't functioning.
Right.
Or I was functioning, but just at such a sub level that and people ask me, well, what did it feel like? And I said, well, one of the things for me is that in that first year and a half to 2 years, the only thing I really remember doing was I binged watched all 10 years of Frasier. That's the only thing that I can actually tell you that I remember. The sad part is that, what, Frasier is still on somewhere in TV land. You can pick up episodes of Frasier, and one of them will come on and I'll go, I know that I binged watched all 10 years of Frasier, but I don't remember this episode.
Yeah. You're actually what we call disturbing short-term energy releasing behaviors. And they found that it's done through sometimes alcohol. People will start drinking so they can go to sleep at night. Sometimes people get into drugs because they can't cope with the emotions that are surfacing from the loss. They don't know how to sit with the emotions and not feel so overwhelmed by them. So there's smoking, alcohol, excessive exercising, because that gets the endorphins going and we just don't have to think about what's really hurting us. Working, stay busy. I mean, you probably heard, just keep yourself busy, honey, and you'll be fine. Right. Just keep busy, so busying yourself is one of the things that we do. And then gaming is another thing, a lot of video gaming or binge watching TV. And it's just, it's a way to numb the brain a little bit so that we don't have to think about those emotions that are underneath the surface that are just dying to get out, but we just don't know if we can trust them. So we'll watch TV. I mean, I binged watched early on in my grief, and it was so bad. I was watching a Spanish series with English subtitles.
Was it Hotel? I watched that. It was Spanish with English subtitles.
Yeah. It was called Blanca or something like that.
Yeah.
Casablanca or something. It was a White House. White House is what it translated. But I got to watching it in my mind. Just reading the subtitles kept me from thinking of anything else. And then I had the drama of the movie, and I watched the whole thing. I mean, it was ridiculous.
All seasons of it.
Ridiculous. But anyway, it was just because I didn't know how to sit with all of that emotion and not feel like I was going to suffocate with it.
Yes. Some days it was like I couldn't take my next breath.
Yes.
How am I going to take my next breath?
Yes, exactly. And that is a physiological response that's going on in the body. And I do believe that our brain is just looking for a steadiness about us again. And I took up relearning to ride a unicycle because I had learned to ride a unicycle when I was 15. And one day I woke up and I felt like my grief was like that dadgum unicycle. I was flipping and flopping and trying to fix my balance. And I couldn't catch my emotional balance after my husband died. And it reminded me of that unicycle. And I thought, I'm going to go get me another unicycle and I'm going to learn to ride that thing, if for nothing else, just so I can experience a sense of balance again.
Right.
And it worked.
Yeah.
And it was slow and steady was my mantra when I was learning to ride that thing. Slow and steady, slow and steady. And then my brain actually felt some peace. And it was like, oh, I'll get there. I want to get there, know? And then once I went through the grief recovery work and got few more tools, it is a daily process. Mm-hmm. But I also know too, that food can be an emotional escape. Mm-hmm. It can be a form of disturbing. And I figured out how that happens too, because you're feeling your feelings and you go eat something and it tastes so good. You don't think about what you're feeling anymore. You just enjoy what you're eating, so there's all forms of disturbing, short-term energy releasing behaviors that we can participate in to avoid the emotion.
Right.
And so I love being able to help people identify what's going on in their life and that they don't have to stay stuck there. And it doesn't have to get worse. You don't have to lay in bed with the pillow over your head or the covers over your head and gain 50 pounds to survive the death of a loved one.
Right. Or whatever that, like one of the things that I loved about what Carol does is realizing that trauma doesn't necessarily have to be the death of a loved one.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the things that so many people don't realize. It can be the death of a job.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
look how many jobs have been lost in this last 2 years.
Look at how, right.
Job loss, betrayal in a marriage. Yeah. That's a huge one. And it's so hard to talk about that one. People can know your spouse died, but they don't all know that there was betrayal in a marriage, and you're choosing to stay, but there's grief there. The loss of a child, it's just all over. So I try to help people understand. And a lot of people will avoid looking at grief because they go, well, I haven't lost a loved one, or I haven't lost a child, or, but they have other losses in their life that are keeping them from what you said earlier, Barbara, a happy life.
Right.
Living into a life by design, like Carol mentioned. They fail to realize that they can create the life they wish existed. Right. They have the power to do that. Yes. It's reaching out and learning the tools, equipping ourselves. And we kind of use the analogy that if I was going to paint a wall, but I didn't have a paintbrush and I tried to use a hammer, it'd be a very sloppy job.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that grief recovery helps people gain tools to deal with loss, no
Right.
matter what the loss is,
Right.
so that you can feel empowered to create what you wish existed.
Right. One of the things that I had to realize was that not only was I grieving the loss of the physical loss of my husband, I was having to grieve, and I wasn't doing a really good job of it, was grieving the life that I had expected to live.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
That was huge.
Yeah.
And when one of the tools, one of the exercises, one of the, in grief recovery was identifying that.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And it was like, oh, right. I expected to dance at my great-grandchildren's weddings with my husband.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he died at 60. Wasn't going to
Yeah.
do that. Was not going to happen.
Yeah.
And yet that was something that we had talked about so often. That was just part of what our future life was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had to learn to grieve with my hidden anger towards God,
Yes.
because I had these hidden expectations that began to surface after he died. And the change, not only was it, like you said, the physical presence was gone, but our world changed.
Yeah.
My identity changed as
Yes.
my role in the church, my role in my community changed, my role in the family changed. There was just all this change. And I found myself having a hard time talking to God, praying to God, and asking for anything, because I had on bended knees cried and prayed that he would be healed.
Right.
And he didn't get the kind of healing I thought he was going to have.
Right.
And when it dawned on me that I was blaming God for my expectations, my unmet expectations. And it made me realize how often and how easy that can be done. That I didn't get what I wanted. Bottom line, I didn't get
Right.
I didn't get what I wanted. I got a no. And how well can I handle my no?
Right. Yep.
And we tell kids all the time, children all the time, to learn how to handle a no. My dad once told us, you learn more about a person by how well they can handle your no than your yes any day of the week.
Right.
Amen.
And here I was getting a really hard no, and it hurt. And I didn't know how well I could handle that. I didn't know how I was going to handle that. But thank goodness for God's grace and time and wisdom, and patience with yourself, till you get what you need, so yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey.
That's it. One day, Mike, I have a podcast, the Everyday Riches show. And one day my co-host and my first co-host of the show was tragically killed in a car accident.
Mhm.
And my next, he had, just through happenstance, he had going to be scheduled as a guest. And I said, Jason, will you still come on and be my co-host for this show, because Pat has been tragically killed. And he came on and we talked about loss and how we handled exactly what we're talking about here. And he said one of the things that they had a hard time with, and everybody is different, when his grandmother died, they were going to cancel the very first Thanksgiving because they didn't know how to handle not having her as the matriarch of Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And finally it dawned on them, and he said, we had to realize that grandma was going to be there anyways. So they got together, they all had Thanksgiving, and then they talked about all of the fun things, all of the fun memories of all the previous Thanksgivings that when their grandmother was there.
Yes.
And it was like, oh, right. We can do that.
Well, and that's one of the most common responses to loss is isolation.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, it's the natural response, because we pull away because we're uncomfortable with our emotions, and we don't know that someone else will be comfortable with our emotions. And I remember just thinking about my husband not being at Christmas brought on my first ever anxiety attack of my life, of my entire life. And I was driving down the highway on I-40, and I just thought about him not being there. And I thought about all the kids and the grandkids. And then it hit me that the one person on earth that knew my children from start to finish was gone. And I felt this humongous weight just engulfed me. And it was brought on by a thought. I wasn't there yet. It was a thought that I had, but I had a physical, emotional response to that ended up making me pull over and take some deep cleansing breaths so I could drive. But that's when I realized the power of thought, for number one, but also how ill-equipped I felt to walk into that next stage. And when we decided to, not have it at home, because we just moved into this house. And so we didn't have any family holiday memories here, but we did change the location and we did get together. But when I was packing up the stockings, because I was hosting, and when I host Christmas, I provide all the stockings. And do I take his stocking or do I leave it home? Little things like that. Do I take the stocking or do I leave it at home? And I'm like, I can't leave it at home, And so I took the stocking, and then it was like, well, I can't put chocolate in it this year. Well, who's going to eat it? Me, all those little things, the things that I used to put in a stocking. I'm like, I'm not going to fill a stocking that's not going to be consumed. But God gave me this great idea to write notes and put little Christmas cards out, and everybody could write a note, their memories with their dad at Christmas, or one of the fondest memories they had of him at Christmas, or what made Christmas special with their dad. And everybody filled his stocking with notes. And then after we did the kitty presents and had our dinner and everything, in the evening, the adults sat down and I read all the notes. And it was such a great way for us to address the white elephant in the room, and embrace our tears and our laughter, because there was some sweet stories and then there were tender stories. So we were able to laugh and cry through that first Christmas. And I'm so thankful that I had gone and got the help that I needed, so that I could, my kids didn't have to lose their dad and their mom in that journey, because that could have happened. And it does happen quite often.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Oh, yeah.
Well,
and it just touches your heart. And, it's things like that can really touch a life, and if you're dealing with something right now, reach out to us.
yes,
You're
absolutely.
reaching out to anything. That's what we're here for. That's
Right.
why we have Thoughtful Thursdays, to bring to life the things that people are dealing with.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's no shame in reaching out.
Mm-mm.
There's no shame in reaching out. So
There should be shame in not reaching out,
yes. Yes.
and yet, especially here in Texas, it's like, buck it up, pull yourself
Right.
up by your bootstraps, that independence, and we're too interconnected for that. And nowadays we are all separated.
Yeah.
By so many things. I mean, so many people have not come out of all this
Craziness.
Yeah.
craziness is a good word. And, just even the not being able to see a smile, in Texas, we've opened up, but it's so much fun to see a smile on people's faces again, because that's the one thing you can give that can brighten somebody's day, and it will pass on and on and on, and it's free. And even for somebody that's in that fog, even if they don't remember, that smile will brighten their day, even if it's only for a moment.
Yes.
Just that little moment of time.
Yeah.
So I do want to tell everybody, please reach out, share this with your friends. click the buttons, whatever it is that you do on the platform you're watching. But, if you need to reach out to Kelly, let us know. Or if you need to reach out to Barbara or to myself, we're here. We're here, and we do this because we want you to have a better life. We want you to have the tools you need to walk through life, because it's not easy down here.
No.
It's a walk, it's a choice. And so I do want to just, any last minute thoughts that you have, Kelly?
I just want people to know that this human journey is, it's real. It doesn't matter what your face structure is, what your nationality is. Loss is inevitable and loss is felt. It is a human experience, and we aren't meant to do it alone. And like you said, there's no shame in reaching out. In fact, the isolation will take you down further in your grief cycle than you need to go. And you don't have a broken brain, you have a broken heart. And there are ways to mend a broken heart. And, we're here, we're available to help you with that.
Yes. So any last thoughts, Barbara?
I just echo what Kelly said. It's just that's the biggest thing.
Mhm.
The deceiver wants to keep you isolated. And we do not have to be isolated.
Right.
And so just, reach out. It's the biggest thing.
If you
One
don't-
thing
go
real
ahead.
quick, Carol, this is a simple analogy. Like if I had a cold and my nose was running, who would be responsible for reaching for a tissue? I
Right.
would.
Amen.
And it's not your fault. Whatever happened to you, the loss that it came upon you, it's not your fault. So we just ask people to take 1% responsibility in addressing the grief and the pain. So reaching out, just like you would reach out for a tissue. There's no judgment when your nose runs or you sneeze. You just get a tissue and you take care of business. It's part of life.
Yes.
And the same with grief. Grief is part of life. And we are responsible for managing or getting help with it. So I would encourage you to do that.
That's great. That's a good analogy. It's a good analogy. And even, I'm going to even address, even if you were, say, in a divorce and you were the person that asked for the divorce, you may think it's your fault, but you still have to reach out because it's still a loss. I don't care if it was an abusive relationship or running around or whatever. But that's a lot of times people beat themselves up thinking, oh, it was my fault because I asked, or because they were the person running around, whatever. But you still have to reach for that tissue because it's still a loss in your life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I just want to thank you for coming on, Kelly. This has been so good. And we do these shows because we were doing our Monday morning motivations, and we realized we have so many people in our lives that we want to bring y'all's knowledge to our viewers, and to thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
That grew out of it. So
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank
I
you.
appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, well, it was
Thanks for coming, Kelly.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Y'all have
bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.